Ottoman military records list 68,000 deaths from battle wounds. They list 466,000 deaths from infectious diseases. These casualties were spread across a theater of geographical variety, from the high peaks of the Caucasus to the marshes of the Persian Gulf. Imperial generals planned their campaigns around human troop movements and artillery placements. They treated the terrain as a static backdrop rather than an active force. Microscopic pathogens and weather systems functioned as the most effective killers. Bacteria and lice exploited the lack of hygiene to consume entire divisions. To understand why these empires eventually collapsed, we have to look past the tactical decisions of the officers and recognize how the environment dictated the outcome. In early 1916, the Ottoman Third Army held the Erzurum fortress in the Caucasus. At 3,000 meters above sea level, the winter environment was defined by sub-zero temperatures and deep snow. Logistical failures left these soldiers without adequate winter gear or consistent food supplies. Cold and starvation effectively immobilized the defensive lines. Soldiers huddled together for warmth in unwashed clothing. This created the perfect environment for lice to spread epidemic typhus, known as military fever. Russian forces used these conditions to their advantage, executing flanking maneuvers through mountain passes that the diseased and frozen Ottoman defenders were no longer capable of holding. Frostbite and typhus rendered the Third Army ineffective. The Russian advance was largely a capture of a force that had already been broken by the Alpine winter. The environment was just as hostile in the heat of Mesopotamia. General Charles Townshend moved his troops up the Tigris until they were surrounded and trapped at the town of Kut. In the scorching heat of the Mesopotamian sun, massive swarms of corpse flies fed on the dead left on the battlefield. These flies then moved into the camps, transferring dysentery and cholera bacteria directly into the British food and water. The British supply lines collapsed. The garrison lost clean water and fresh food, leading to mass starvation and unmanageable infection rates. Medical evacuations by river were completely inadequate. Hospital ships were unable to keep pace with the thousands of sick men, culminating in a total surrender of the garrison. The Siege of Kut was ended by epidemiological forces. The British Empire was bled dry by thirst and bacteria. The biological impact of the war quickly moved beyond the front lines. As troops retreated and demobilized, typhus and cholera moved with them. Microbes hitched rides on crowded trains and marching columns, infecting the villages and cities along the route. During the Armenian genocide, the Ottoman state forced hundreds of thousands of civilians into marches through the desert and mountains. These populations were denied medical care and vaccinations. The lack of sanitation turned deportation routes and transit camps into hotbeds for disease. Rotting roadside environments localized epidemics. This spillover turned the war into a public health crisis. Civilian populations became the primary target for these biological agents. By 1916, the scale of the deaths forced the Ottoman state to acknowledge that it was failing to manage the biological reality of the war. In response, the military implemented an industrial-scale health campaign. They deployed mobile disinfection units, mandated public baths, and launched empire-wide vaccination programs. This shifted the war into two distinct efforts, one against the human enemy and another against the microbes that were causing the majority of the casualties. Historical maps of 1914 to 1918 show the political borders of these empires shifting back and forth as armies captured and lost territory. But those borders were temporary. The casualty counts show that the environment remained the most persistent and effective force in the theater. The legacy of the war in the Middle East is defined by these numbers. Military success in the region eventually required states to reorganize their infrastructure just to keep their soldiers alive in the face of the natural world. Walk through the divided cities of the Middle East today, and the common narrative is that these conflicts are ancient, the result of religious wars stretching back to the Crusades. The records tell a different story. The specific borders on our maps and the national identities attached to them appeared quite recently. This chart tracks the influence of foreign intervention over time. The spike between 1914 and 1922 marks the era when European diplomats drafted the current map of the region. Most of us learn about the First World War through the trenches of the Western Front. But by focusing only on Europe, we overlook the Ottoman front. the specific theater where the states of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel and Palestine were born. To understand the modern Middle East, we have to look at the British Empire's survival strategy during the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Historians call this the Triple Promise, a period when Britain pledged the exact same Ottoman territories to 3 different groups at the same time. Understanding this history requires looking past the common tropes of cultural clashes and reviewing the objective geopolitical receipts. Mastering this specific diplomatic ledger provides a reliable framework for navigating today's headlines without falling victim to modern propaganda. In 1914, the Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of Germany. To mobilize the global Muslim community, the Sultan declared a jihad against the Allied powers. This declaration caused immediate concern in London. Britain ruled millions of Muslim subjects in India and Egypt, and they feared this call to arms would trigger internal uprisings. To neutralize the Sultan's influence, Britain looked for a rival Islamic leader with enough religious authority to fracture the Ottoman call to war. They found him in Sharif Hussein of Mecca. In the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence of 1915, Britain made a formal offer. They would support an Arab rebellion against the Ottomans in exchange for military cooperation. The Arab forces fulfilled their side of the agreement. Their insurgency tied down tens of thousands of Turkish troops in grueling desert campaigns, providing critical relief for British forces. This matrix shows the British ledger. In exchange for the revolt, Britain pledged to support an independent Arab state. However, the wording was hedged. By excluding areas west of the districts of Damascus, Britain avoided guaranteeing Palestine and Lebanon, creating structural tension for future conflict. While these negotiations were public, a different set of plans was being drafted in the secret backrooms of European diplomacy. Britain needed to maintain its alliance with France. To ensure their cooperation, diplomats drafted the confidential Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916. This agreement drew a line across the map, dividing post-Ottoman territory into rigid colonial spheres for Britain and France. Overlaying the borders of the promised Arab state reveals the conflict. Territories promised to Arab leadership were simultaneously assigned to European powers. This adds a second entry to our ledger, a secret partition that directly conflicted with the promise of Arab independence. The Arab forces, led by Emir Faisal, fought the remainder of the war unaware that their borders had already been negotiated away by their allies. The Sykes-Picot Agreement meant that the geopolitical foundation of the region was built on a documented betrayal before the war had even ended. In 1917, Britain introduced a third major wartime diplomatic maneuver concerning the same territory. The Balfour Declaration was a public pledge to support a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Britain's goal was to secure new political alliances and create a strategic buffer zone near the Suez Canal. With this third entry, the ledger is complete. 3 separate agreements with 3 different allies, all claiming the same land. At the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, these contradictory promises collided. France demanded control over Syria, as outlined in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, refusing to accept an independent Arab state. Arab forces, having already captured Damascus, established the Arab Kingdom of Syria, attempting to turn the promise of independence into a physical reality. The French military marched on Damascus and dismantled the new Arab government. The League of Nations eventually formalized this through mandates, legally placing the region under British and French control. The collapse of the independent Arab government in Damascus replaced the hope of self-determination with colonial administration. In the decades that followed, this moment became a primary rallying point for movements that viewed Western powers with a deep-seated suspicion of broken faith. The diplomatic fallout of the 1920s didn't stay in the past. It shaped the maps we use today. To manage the unrest, Britain implemented the Sharifian solution, placing the displaced Hashemite leaders onto the thrones of newly created states like Iraq and Jordan. These governments were tasked with ruling over arbitrarily grouped populations within borders that had been designed to serve imperial interests. This split screen shows the 1920 mandate borders. When morphed into modern conflict zones, the geographic overlap is clear. The Triple Promise framework provides a map for understanding modern news coverage, tracing current border disputes in Iraq and Syria back to these overlapping pledges. This history suggests that we cannot explain these conflicts by simply pointing to local culture or ancient religious differences. Viewing the Middle East through the lens of this imperial intervention provides a different way to evaluate the stability of its current borders. Adopting this perspective protects you from oversimplified narratives. It allows you to evaluate the modern Middle East by looking at the actual historical ledger.